So before we dive into the conversation, I have a little bit of a question. I don't want to spend too much time on this, but I thought it
Go
was
ahead.
very interesting. So your website has, the first time I checked out your website when I was like doing a little bit of research for the interview, I was like, oh, cool. It's like waves and very blue. And then I was like, oh, you started in the Royal Dutch Navy. And I don't know if you could just give a little bit of insight because I'm very fascinated what technology and Royal Dutch Navy have to do with each other.
So this is the thing with technology, right? A lot of people think about dev when they talk about technology,
Yeah.
but there's something before that. So when I started out in the Navy, I was an electrician. Um, that was my first job. So I was about 16, just barely legally able to to join the Navy. Um, I found out that I was better in mechanical engineering. So I did a bit of mechanical engineering, and then found out that basically all tech was fun. And so, as you can imagine, on those ships, you have to keep them sailing, right? So,
Yeah.
if you're an engineer on one of the ships, you basically do everything. It's electrical, hydraulic, pneumatic. It really doesn't matter, including IT. So slowly, I shifted from electrical to mechanical, which was a little bit odd, into IT more. And that's when I actually went to the Air Force to join the full IT team instead of just doing everything basically on the ship.
That's so cool. And then you went from that into recruitment eventually.
Oh no, yeah,
Or
well,
was
there's
it
there's a lot in between.
cool?
So no, so I went to the Air Force. So I stayed in the military for about 18 and a half years,
Yeah.
of which 12 and a half years in the Navy. Sorry, in the Air Force. Navy was about 5 years. Um, and in the Air Force, I was a communication specialist. Sounds nice, but it's the word specialist, right? So basically, that means that I did everything with radio signals, everything with satellite signals, but IT as well.
Yeah.
So the more I grew into that, the more fun I had. And then at a certain moment, you're too old for the military, so you have to leave. So I left the military and I couldn't find a job. It's not in IT because the military is now it's changed, but we were way behind in technology,
Mm-hmm.
and I mean way behind. So what I actually did is I went into the offshore oil and gas. So terrible job, but it brought in money.
That's what we all
um,
need.
yep. So it was a mix between everything again. So basically, what I did at the Navy, did that for a few years, and then suddenly got a project engineering job, which and this is where my recruitment story starts, right? Which I wasn't capable of doing on paper. I didn't have any of the paperwork that I needed. I didn't have any of the experience that I needed for them. And still, the recruiter approached me, which was kind of odd. Um, I had a talk. I had 3 interviews in total at the company. I was hired. Still don't know why, because I was lacking everything they were needing. I saw the job description. And there was only one thing: able to communicate with every level. And that's it. But the rest,
That's amazing.
for, first day I came in, I didn't even know what I was looking at. It was sensors and stuff, and I was,
Yeah,
what's
yeah,
that? And what's that? And what's that? That was absolutely terrible. But that was really nice, and that's where I started building teams and stuff. And then I made the switch to recruitment. But it was after I started building teams for that company and basically getting the right people in.
yeah.
That's where I thought, hey, maybe I'm doing something that I like, but not full time.
So what
And
was
then,
that?
yeah,
Because that role's wasn't strictly recruitment then. What was that first role where you were
absolutely
building
not. Yeah.
teams?
So that was a project engineering
Right.
role. So basically, we had a project, and you get the right people for that team.
Yeah.
And that was nice. You could actually pick. You had a discussion with who you wanted on the
Cool,
team,
cool.
looked at what they could learn, etc., etc., and then you build a team.
Yeah.
No, recruitment was never on purpose.
Yeah, yeah,
Never.
yeah. Cool. I mean, but it's interesting because that first role, I guess, has many of the parallels that you can then like. That's an easier switch into recruitment because you're thinking
Yeah,
about team
definitely.
building and who the right person is and skill sets
Yeah.
and that kind of thing. So very interesting. What a cool story from like offshore oil and gas to tech recruitment. But yeah, it's cool. I mean, it's like you said
It's a weird one.
when we first spoke and you said that you started out as an engineer
Yeah.
or in tech and in development. I guess, yeah, like you said, people don't often, I didn't think about like the breadth of what that could entail. It's not always dev, so that is very cool.
Yeah, and it's that's something that you will see with a lot of recruiters. Whenever I had a discussion last week with a recruiter that was like, "But yeah, but you were in dev." I said, "No, I was an engineer."
Yeah.
Yeah, so can you code? I'm like, yes, I can code, but I wasn't a dev. There's more than just development, but the
Yeah,
term engineering has become such an IT term
exactly.
instead of the generic term, because it's actually a title, it's not so much a job,
Yeah,
right? um, and you will actually see that a lot of people still have issues with difference between a IT engineer, so for instance a system engineer or a developer or somebody that does hydraulics.
yeah,
All engineers.
very cool. Before we continue, do you have a hard deadline for this interview? I just want to make sure that I'm not keeping you longer than you have available.
I have till 11:15.
Cool. So
I
like
might be able to extend it a little
cool,
bit,
but like an hour from now, more or less, right?
yeah.
Perfect. Cool. That'll be fine. I'll just try and stick to that. Cool. So yeah, thanks for that little introduction. Before we dive into the actual conversation, which I'm excited to do, I have a few rapid fire questions just to get to know you a little bit better. You couldn't prepare for these; they're just a little bit fun, and hopefully, just first answer that comes to mind. There's no follow-up questions, so we'll just get through them quite quickly. First one: after a really tiring day, how do you spend your evening?
Well, then it gets more tiring. So I have a little one, 4 years old, little daughter. So as soon as I am done with work, basically it's like, hey, daddy's back. And then I spend time with her, which is harder than work, but it's much more fun.
Yeah, you can't really do project management and stuff with a 4-year-old. It's
No.
very reactive. But cool. And then tea or coffee, and how do you take it?
Tea and without sugar.
Nice.
So I quit sugar a long time ago. It doesn't really work well for me. And coffee, you don't want to see me on coffee. You think I talk fast right now? You don't want to see that one.
And then what's a really good work-related book that you have read recently?
So this might come as a little bit of a surprise, but it's TED Talks by Carmine Gallo. So I'm a big fan of storytelling in recruitment. And that book is one of the best books I've read on storytelling.
Cool.
Especially when you talk to candidates. It really helps if you can tell your story in about a minute or so before you go into their story and be able to tell the story of the company, those kind of things. And it's much different than just having a discussion. It's actually bringing some value. So that's the most important book I read.
Very cool. And then what is something you wish existed but doesn't?
A good ATS.
We'll get onto that just now. And then last question, what is a thing that cost you less than 50 euros but was the best investment most recently?
My ring light over there. So yeah, so having good lighting. This is something that I always hated when talking to other people, candidates, but even more professionals, recruiters, when they have backlights or you hardly see them or one part is shaded.
Yeah.
So, and to be honest, a decent ring light, about 25 centimeters in diameter, is about 30 euros.
Yeah.
That's it, and it really makes it a little bit better. You still have to deal with the face, but the lighting is good.
Very cool. Yeah, I do not underappreciate the value of good lighting. I'm like barely able to do it here, but I've got like really nice windows on this side, so it's working for me. But yeah, good investment.
That works. Side lights is good.
Cool, but thanks for that intro. So I actually think the little introduction we had just now to your career was really a really good place to start, because that's sort of the place from which this conversation is going to springboard. But as you mentioned, you started out as an engineer, not traditional dev, but in IT and in technology, and then eventually moved into being like a hiring manager role or project engineer. Both, yeah. And now you're obviously a senior internal tech recruiter. And because of this, you have quite a lot of experience on both sides of the hiring process. You've obviously, reached out to, and now you do the reaching out. So, a common problem you see a lot of internal recruiters struggle with is communicating with engineers, because not all recruiters are rooted in tech. Some of them don't have the tech experience, but that does include everything from reaching out to engaging with them during an interview. So as someone who has been on both sides, you've got a pretty good idea of what each side wants and needs. And I think that makes your approach to tech recruitment really interesting. And I think a lot of people can learn from that. So that's sort of like the outline of our conversation. But Just before we dive into how you do that practically, I'd like to understand, you've obviously had the experience on both sides, but what, like, apart from the obvious one, which I think is just like maybe recruiters don't have the technical know-how, why do internal recruiters struggle to communicate with engineers? Like, what's generally missing in that relationship?
So their background is HR. It's that simple. A lot of recruiters come from, well, basically everything, right? There's no degree needed to become a recruiter, and they are taught to talk in the same way, to approach people in the same way, to talk to hiring managers in a certain way, right? In a lot of companies, you have a kickoff document where you actually have to go through all those points, and that's what they do, and that's it. They don't have an understanding of what an engineer encounters in their work, right? So it's not just the technology. That's not even the biggest thing. The biggest thing is being able to understand what they are doing and how they are doing. They experience different kind of pressure, right? For a recruiter, it might be a KPI. For an engineer, it might be a deadline, or seeing that they suddenly have a bug in their code or something like that. For the way we're working is different. They work Kanban or Agile or Scrum. I haven't seen that yet in HR. I see some people try it, but so it's the mindset is different. It's not just the technology, because the technology, that's the easy part. But it's actually understanding what are the roadblocks they're looking at. What is the daily life of an engineer? Why are they spending the day like that? What are the issues? And that's what's missing with a lot of people.
Right.
And you can actually solve that by talking to engineers, talking to your engineering teams.
So what, I mean, as I said, we'll dive into how you can overcome that now, but what impact does not having that in the relationship have? Because I think like recruiters still hire engineers. It's, you know, it's not like, oh, I can't hire someone, but what impact does that not having that mindset have? And maybe you can, I don't know, use an example or a story from past experience to illustrate that a little bit.
Yeah, so this is the simple one. So I started hiring at Elastic in this case for a machine learning engineer. Now, I'm not a machine learning engineer. I know the technology, I know what to look for, and I understand the relationships between it, but I didn't know what they were doing. So instead of just going to the hiring manager and saying, hey, what do you need? What are you looking for? I actually had a conversation. It took me 2 hours instead of the just simple 45 minutes, right? 2 hours of getting to know them, building rapport. That's one. Two, making it clear, hey, listen, I want to learn from you. I want to know what you're actually looking for. And instead of going to that job description, what you normally do, actually go deep diving into what kind of projects are you looking for? What kind of people are you working with? Not looking for, but working with, because then you can paint a picture of what they're missing. And then actually being able to say, hey, listen, from your story, I'm gathering this information. So you're actually missing a junior person instead of a senior person, because you have all the seniors in the world. So if everybody's a senior, who's the senior then, right? So it's about being a partner, and not just a business partner, but an actual conversation partner.
Yeah.
And trying to understand them. But as soon as you hang up that phone, or just before, ask them, who can I talk to on the team?
Yeah.
And that's where how you actually can solve that. I spoke to the team, and I actually sat down with the team, wonderful engineers. They actually said, hey, you know what? And that was pre-COVID. Let's sit together, open your laptop, and let's source together.
Yeah.
And with every profile we saw, they explained me why it wasn't a fit, or why it was a fit, or how it ties into a project they were doing.
Yeah.
It's a lot of time that you have to spend, but it comes back into your pipeline, because your quality is going to be way higher.
Yeah, I think so. I'd love to like double click on that, but just quickly, like if that doesn't happen and the recruiter takes the first approach where you said like, what role do you need? What impact does that have down the line? Like, just I guess I'm just trying to understand the difference between what one approach results in and the other one does.
Yeah. So what the approach where they just pick the job description will end up in a lot of candidates that they're reaching out to that aren't ready for the job, don't have the right skill set, or not the right interest, right? Because if you don't really understand the job, you're sourcing on buzzwords.
Yeah.
And that's really hard. And then when you find the right people by accident, or maybe just because you're a good sourcer, you find the right people, then you're going to talk about both the hiring manager experience and the candidate experience that's going to be lacking because you really didn't know enough about the job to get the right people in. And now they're talking to probably the wrong people still.
Yeah.
And the candidate is talking to the wrong company. So you're basically letting two sides down because you didn't invest enough in your communication.
Yeah.
And that's the impact. So instead of having a handful of people in your pipeline, you're going to send them 20. Can you please look at them? Instead of actually helping them with their job, you're going to basically say, hey, you do my job because I found some profiles now. You check if they're right.
Yeah. And what I like the last time we spoke, you were saying as someone who was on the being reached out to by recruiters, you've had your fair share of completely ignoring a recruiter's message or actually engaging with them. So what are some of the biggest mistakes, based on that approach, that mindset that they don't have? How does that translate into the biggest mistakes the recruiter makes when they actually communicate with an engineer?
So when you start, do you mean the reach out or the actual communication when they reach out?
Yeah, like first message onwards. Like what are some of the biggest mistakes? Yeah.
Biggest word, template. I hate templates, and everybody does. It's the one way to show somebody that you really don't care. I've seen them in all varieties, from pretty okay templates to the absolute worst, where they basically say, hey, all. They start with, hey, all. I have a job. I need you. They don't tell you why. They give you a job description, and they end with, if you know somebody else, please let us know. And I'm like, so this wasn't aimed at me, and you really don't care.
Yeah.
And that's what you see a lot. You see a lot of outreach that's absolutely incorrect, where it's really clear that they didn't read your profile. I was reached out for a job as a VP of software engineering. Now, I can do a lot, but the VP of software engineering, I actually went on the call because I was so pissed off. I went on the call.
I'm so glad I was not that recruiter.
It took the person 10 minutes before he found out that I was a recruiter. 10 minutes.
That's so funny.
It was one bullshit call, and he was super happy with me. And I was like, I'm going to announce that I found the right person, and you're definitely what we're looking for. And then I basically asked him to open my profile. We went over the profile, and he hung up. He didn't even finish the conversation. He just hung up.
Wow. Okay.
But and imagine being a developer at this moment. Imagine being a site reliability engineer. These are one of the most seeked out after persons at the moment, right? And getting at least 8 or 9 recruiters reaching out to you per week.
Yeah.
And 99% of them are crappy messages.
Yeah.
You're going to block everybody. You're not going to even look at the good ones. You're going to block everybody.
Yeah. So if I'm understanding correctly, just to sort of paraphrase, templates are obviously something that are really easy to spot. So if you're copy pasting a message, that's generally a red flag. That's just something that, it's obvious that you send it to more than one person. And I think your point earlier, like not having the mindset of what problems does this person face on a day-to-day basis, then it just becomes here is a role, you work in this industry, which it's hard to really understand, like why me? What about me do you really want?
Yeah.
So I get that as well. And I think some of what you were talking about with building rapport and actually speaking to the team are, I mean, like you said, like I don't know if the solution is every recruiter should be a developer first. Like, I don't think that's necessarily the case.
Not needed. No.
So it is just how do you, without that mindset, how do you make up for it? And some of the things you were talking about is like building rapport with a hiring manager and actually sitting with the team. And I really like that, of like sourcing with the team that you're going to hire for. On the first one, when it comes to chatting to the hiring manager, you said that there's this idea of deep diving into projects and building a better rapport with them. Can you tell me a bit more about, like, what are some of the questions that you find really work in that thing? I think you're already talking about, I was trying to write them down as you were going, so I can't remember them perfectly now, but what are some of the like good questions there?
So the best question that I found that really works is, what are you missing? Instead of what are you looking for? it changes the whole discussion, because when you say, what are you looking for?
Yeah.
The hiring manager will actually go for the optimum, right? We're looking for these skill sets. We're looking for this experience.
Yeah.
But by asking them, hey, what are you missing in your team? You're going to actually get information about the projects, about the team. So
Right.
instead of just asking them for a checklist, you're asking them for what's happening and why is it happening. If you ask a hiring manager, hey, what are you missing in your team? They're probably coming up with, it's going to be silent. Most cases, if they're not used to it, they're going to be silent. They're like, crap, let me think about that. And then as well, we have so much senior people. We're looking at this project. We're missing this skill. But now that you speak of it, it would be nice if we had.
Yeah.
And that's a conversation starter. And that really changes the whole conversation, because most cases it's like, hey, what are you looking for? And you get a checklist.
Yeah.
And I do this with candidates as well, right? I have two simple questions. Why us as a company, and why this position? I'm not asking them why they're leaving their company. So why do that with a hiring manager?
Yeah.
You're not going to replace the person that was there before. It's
Yeah.
never going to be a one-on-one. You want to make the team better. So ask them, hey, what are you missing? And that's the start. And that's also an interesting question as a hiring manager, because it makes them think and valued.
Yeah. So what I really like there is just tying this back to, you said that without the mindset, you source for buzzwords. I think if you say, what are you looking for? They might say, I need a data scientist. And a recruiter will literally use that and just do a scrub for data scientists, which makes it really hard to reach out to a developer, because then they say like, hey, I'm looking for a data scientist. And that's just the title on this person's page. Whereas, as you said, if you ask for what's missing, they might say, I need someone who can analyze or what's the word, like synchronize our data or streamline our data. All of a sudden you have like a skill that you can look for. And that's easier to sort of pinpoint. You can say, hey, look, I see you have experience with large databases at your previous company. We're looking for someone to, help us with ours. That's immediately more personal, and you don't have to have years of tech experience to sort of pick up on that. So I think that captures it really well.
And that's the whole thing, right? I always say I cheat a little bit because I have that background, but I've met amazing recruiters that actually don't have a technical background, and they don't play with tech in the free times, but they're good communicators. They understand what to ask. And that's the thing, right? If you understand what to ask from a person and what to tell to a person, those two tie into each other.
Yeah. Cool. And then the other thing you mentioned, which I really, I'd love for you to tell me more about, is actually sourcing with the team that you're going to hire for. I think you said that this is like, it's obviously takes a lot more time, and you're asking now people to sit with you and give you their time. But just tell me more about like what that looks like in real life. Like almost take me into that scene.
So there are a few options. There's one where, and this is what I see with most recruiters, right? They say, hey, I source with the team. So what they do is they say, open a LinkedIn project, they add candidates to it, and the hiring team actually looks into the candidates and says yes or no. Now, while this is effective, you won't learn, because basically they only say yes or no and maybe give a comment. What you can also do, and especially now, is just have a Zoom call, share a screen, and go over your results, but go over your Boolean string. Remember, most engineers, especially in development, they know what a Boolean string is.
Yeah.
It's not that special. It's a query. Here you go.
Yeah.
So they will actually be able to help you with the Boolean string, but also with, you're using this buzzword, but you're missing this one. Or do you actually know what the difference is between them, or why we're using them? The best example is that I reached out to a person and to a front-end engineer, and they spoke to about 6-7 recruiters before me, some big brand companies, to be fair. And they asked them all the same question: will I be using Node.js? And all of them said yes, because they were looking for a front-end engineer. However, Node.js is back-end. So they were basically testing the recruiter if they were knowing what they're talking about.
Yeah.
And that's what engineers now do. Candidates do that, and I don't blame them.
Yeah.
Hiring managers do that as well. They're gonna test you because they want to know if you know what to do, what you're doing. So when you actually say, "Hey, I don't know enough about this. I'm gonna source with your team, learn from them," they will know that it will impact their quality of hire at this moment, but also in the future.
Yeah.
And that's the whole thing that you have to make sure that they understand. Hey, I'm going to spend a lot of time with your team. Your team is going to spend a lot of time. However, the return of interest will be way higher as normal because they don't have to go all through all those crappy candidates that I'm submitting to you.
Yeah, I think that's, like you said, it's as if you don't know what you don't know, it's really hard to spot where you're making mistakes. But I mean, if you literally share your screen, someone can say, "Hey, that doesn't look as good as it could be." That's like immediately valuable. So that's that's really cool. But I mean, how do you get buy-in from the team to actually sit with you and do that, or how do you make it so that it's not this massive undertaking, or they have to sit for an hour and take that time out of their day?
Two things. One, show that you're really interested, and to do some homework before you even go into it, right? I got a nice book, Speaking Tech. It's a super simple book. I still have it in my closet somewhere. And I will share the ISBN number. But basically, it's a book that talks tech on a high level. So what is front end? What are you actually doing? So basically, they're building a web app, and they're taking you to every step of quality assurance, testing, all those kind of things. If you can go to your hiring manager and actually say, hey, listen, I've done this research. I looked into what you're doing, but I'm missing these key parts of information. Can I please talk to your team? They see the effort that you put in.
Yeah.
They see it and they will like it. And then if you say, hey, listen, this will actually impact your quality of hire in the future. This will actually impact the quality of the pipeline and will eventually save your engineers time of interviewing. That's really going to be helpful because you understand the tech. You can have a more meaningful discussion as well with the people in the first discussion. So you're going to actually save them a lot of time on the rest of the interviews. So it's creating buy-in is by making sure that they know how much time they can save by putting in a little bit extra time in the beginning.
Yeah, and I think it's also, I think you said it earlier, it shows that you value their input and their opinion as well. You're almost making it a lot more, well, you are making it a lot more collaborative, and getting them to help you as opposed to just asking them a question and then going away for a week and then coming back and saying found someone. It's like way more interactive in that sense, which is useful insight.
Yeah, you have to be a partner.
Yeah.
You have to be a partner. You can be a reactive recruiter, and a lot of agencies are pushed towards that because if you're in an agency, you hardly have that opportunity. But if you're in-house, you have all the knowledge there. Don't be reactive, be proactive, talk to them. Even if there's no role open and you know that the team is light on work, that's the moment that you talk to them, right? If you see that, hey, they don't have a lot of project load, and you can actually talk to the hiring manager, even though you're not hiring for them at that moment, talk to the engineers, learn from them.
Yeah. I think that's like talk to people outside of hiring. Don't just come to them when it's hiring.
Yeah.
It's like totally. It's like don't just come to me when you need something. It's like build rapport.
And it does
outside
has
of
its
that.
benefits. Yeah. And it does have its benefits because you build rapport with the hiring team as well. You will actually hear from them, hey, listen, Mark, I'm looking for another job, just so you know. And you can either help them stay within the company by finding another solution for them, or at least know that, hey, crap, I need to be sourcing for somebody else now often before the hiring manager even knows, because they have that rapport. They're going to trust you, and you make sure that you keep that trust, of course, but you can at least use it to already look for something else for them and retain them or already source. It's building rapport goes two ways.
So we've mentioned this, the first sort of question being, what are you missing as opposed to what are you looking for? We've also spoken about sitting and actively sourcing with the team that you're hiring for, as well as building rapport and learning from people, even when you're not hiring. Are there any other approaches, also maybe specifically for what to say and what not to say to engineers that we haven't yet covered, that you want to talk about still?
Of course. So in outreach, don't just put the job description in there. You're asking them to click a link. You're asking them to put some effort in, right? This may sound weird, but if you get 10 reach outs a day or a week and everybody asks you, hey, go to this job position, why would I? Why would I click a link because you want me to?
Yeah.
Instead, give them the information that actually counts. You instead of, I would say that instead of scanning, start reading. Read their profile and see what's in your job that actually is relevant to their profile, and mix that into your message.
Right.
And don't use the job description. Tell them what they're actually going to do instead of the job description, because the job description, everybody knows, if you're lucky, it's 80% correct, but often it's just a wish list. Be genuine in, hey, this is the project that you're going to work on. This is the impact, especially that one. This is the impact that you're going to have in this team. And these are the benefits coming your way. And don't talk about ping pong tables. Nobody cares.
Yeah.
It's something that was nice in the beginning, but actually, especially with remote work, you see that a lot of, especially developers say, leave me alone, let me be. I'll just do my stuff. And when I want to reach out, we're going to connect.
Yeah.
Salespeople want to play ping pong. You hardly see engineers doing that. They rather do other stuff.
Yeah.
It's an interesting.
Yeah. So just on that, I'd like to zoom in on the read, don't scan, because I think that's an interesting point. Just to try and understand, like, more practically, what kinds of things do you look for when you read? Like, are there certain triggers that you pick up on, or threads you pull on when you actually reach out to? Is it like past projects? Is it certain things they did in school? Like, what kind of keywords or even just things like that you look for?
So what I normally look for is as soon as I found them via Boolean search, right? I'm going to look at the profile. I'm going to actually scan really quick. Hey, do they actually have it, or did my Boolean go wrong? That's the first one, of course. But as soon as I start, and as soon as I think, hey, this could be a person, I'm going to read it. Intro. Most people have a summary, right, on their profile. And it doesn't matter which medium you're using, they have a summary. Try to find out if there is a certain way of speaking, right? Even language can make the differentiator between they're going to accept my message or not. If you see somebody that's very informal on their summary, be informal as well. If they're very formal, be formal, right? Take into account where they are, which country, because there are some standards there as well. In Germany, you're going to be more formal. In the Netherlands, it's hey, hi, buddy, whatever. It doesn't really matter. And you basically go down. The first thing that I do is I look at the first employer experience, the second one, then I go all the way down and see, did they have some projects? Do they have some referrals that actually say, hey, you're amazing because of this and that? Because you can actually put that in, right? And then you look at the actual, if they have projects, maybe even go to the GitHub and see what kind of projects they actually did and see if it's actually relevant to what you're doing or not. Do you see a step up for them or a change for them that they're actually wanting, or it's going to be more of the same? Because that's going to make a difference as well.
Yeah.
So while that takes a little bit longer in the beginning, it now takes me about 3 minutes to scan a profile really well.
Yeah.
Or read a profile really well. Scanning is a few seconds, but you will actually skip on a lot of good talent.
Yeah.
And 3 minutes, that it's a difference between sending 100 people to your hiring team or just 5. But those 5 are quality. Yeah. So it's weighing, what do you want?
Yeah, and if you find like a GitHub, if you've involved the team in that, you can actually, even if it doesn't make any sense to you or what projects are exciting, you can send that or share that with the team. Be like, hey, what do you think of their GitHub profile? Do you see any cool projects that you find interesting? And that kind of feedback, I think, is also useful.
And then you can actually use that engineer's name, if they're okay with it, in that outreach and said, hey, I let one of the people on the team look at it. This is his name, and he really liked what you're doing.
Yeah.
And that really helps as well, because it makes it more personal, but also more positive, makes them more special. Because to be honest, everybody wants to feel special, right?
Yeah.
That's the key thing. You want to feel special. You get a message, you want to be unpacking a present and seeing, they really care about me, instead of, hey, I got a nice job for you. Do you want to do it? That's the difference.
Yeah. And I think we can, I'm just going to assume that all recruiters spend time on candidates in any case. But I think the thing that shows is that you're showing them, hey, I did spend time on you. I'm not just sending you a message. Like, you don't have to say, explicitly, like, this is not a template. You can act, just by saying something like that, it's easy to see, oh, wow, they sent my, GitHub repo to one of their devs to have a look at. That's like, they looked at my profile, they actually cared about something that I did or the work that I do.
And you used the right word there. We care,
Yeah.
right? This is a thing when you hit a market where everybody can do your job. Everybody can become a recruiter.
Yeah.
But now think about how many people care about hiring people and giving them a new job, or care about the bonus that they're going to get when they hire someone.
Yeah.
If you're into the latter one, don't go for those high profile roles, because you're not going to get them, because they won't like you.
Yeah.
But if you really care about humans, this is the best effort you can ever do, because you're actually going to make all people happy. You're going to like your job better because you're not just doing the same shitty conversation and outreach every time, right? Your hiring manager is going to be more happy because they get the right candidates and they see that you care. And your candidate's going to be more happy because they see that you care and they want to join.
Yeah.
It's a triple win.
Yeah. And I think there's always that that thing that I hear of, like, you are asking this person to spend time outside of, if they have a job, spend time outside of their working hours on a phone call with you. That shouldn't be the time when you figure out if they're right for the job. You should have a pretty good hunch that this person might be the right, and it's not something you're like halfway through the call you figure out, okay, actually not this one, because that's, now you've wasted this person's time. And I think that's why engineers are so potentially so careful about who they talk to.
It's gonna destroy your reputation. And on the positive side, if you actually put in that effort, the chances of them referring somebody else went up just by 100%. Because if you give them a good experience, they're gonna actually say, and this is the terrible thing to say, but they're actually gonna say, "Hey, I spoke to a good recruiter," which is quite rare nowadays.
Yeah.
I tried to hire for a new recruiter about a year ago. I rejected so many people. It's unbelievable, because they actually didn't care.
Yeah.
And when you don't care, you will not be able to talk to engineers that way.
Yeah. So just to sort of close this up with the last little point, if you could only ever get one thing 100% right when you're communicating with engineers during your hiring process, what would that thing be and why? We may have already like walked around some of those, but just as a sort of like last final statement, what would it be?
It's a very difficult one. It's a really very difficult one. Especially during the tech. If you're talking about during the experience, make sure they feel included. That's the one thing you need to do 100% right, because it's very simple. A candidate that might not have all the boxes that you want to tick off can still be an amazing hire. But if you left them out of the candidate experience, they're not going to come back. So it's you really have to care deeply about making sure that they are included, making sure that you keep them updated. It takes you about 5 seconds to do that, right? Oh, we're so busy, 5 seconds. But for that person, it's a difference of night and day.
Yeah.
So get one thing right, make sure they feel included, make sure they feel part of, not of the process, but part of becoming a part of the company. So you don't want to be in the process as a candidate. You don't want to hear, well, we're putting you through a process. You're not canned food, right? As a candidate, you want to hear, hey, your interview went really well. This is the feedback that we're getting. So you can work on this point, and let's go on. Or if you actually say, hey, we have to let you go, help them. Tell them why. Give them that feedback. That's making sure that they feel included, that they actually feel part of the company a little bit already. Because next time you're looking for them, in 2 years' time or 3 years' time, they might have those skills. They might have worked on them. And then there's suddenly that hire that you really want to have. And if you messed up by not making them feel included, you're going to lose out to another company.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, I mean, like you said, it's in retrospect, if you think about it, it's quite simple, but it's one of those things that is easy to forget if you get too caught up in your systems or your like to-do list or your task list. That sort of, just reaching out and saying, hey, I'm going to get back to you by tomorrow. I'm just like swamped with stuff. Like that doesn't, it's not instinct, I don't think, for a lot of people. So that is like just something to be a bit more deliberate about.
A lot of people think about the hires. We need to make a hire. We need to make sure that they land at the same spot. a lot, but the good recruiters out there, and there are enough of them, right? They actually think, hold on, this person might be the next hire. Or if they're really nice, they will actually think, hold on, you're not ready for our company yet, but with these tips, you can actually go somewhere else first, be successful, and we might talk in the future. But at least help a person, and it's just a few seconds work. Give them the feedback. Even copy paste it if you need. Give them the feedback because they can grow from it. That's part of being a recruiter, right?
Yeah.
You have to be interested in people.
And is that feedback stuff you collect from hiring manager and team as well? Because I can imagine it's easier if you have, you know, some sort of technical background to be able to pinpoint certain things. But if you don't have that and you're trying to develop a better mindset, like is that, can you collect that feedback? And like how is that, like what is a good piece of advice for collecting feedback?
So build that rapport, right? And tell them, hey, listen, explain them just what I said right now, right? Explain them, hey, listen, these candidates that we're rejecting might not be right now a beautiful fit, but they might be in the future. So if we give them the right feedback, you're not only going to help people, but they might turn back as well. It's going to give us a good name. And to be honest, the last part is, what if you were interviewing right now and you got rejected and you don't know why? How does it make you feel? And that often helps to pull them over the line.
Yeah.
And that to say, okay, you know what, we're going to actually put some good, decent feedback in.
Yeah.
At the current company, at Elastic, we have something called the structured interview process, where they actually have to give detailed feedback on why. That can also help you as well, because then it's part of the process. And then they really have to do it, because otherwise they can't reject.
Yeah.
Because it has to be based on data, right? You can't say, I didn't like the person.
Yeah.
Why? Because then you can actually go to the candidate and say, hey, listen, you made an impression, but unfortunately, it was a little bit too much. So maybe work on this and this and this. Or what often really helps is, hey, use your STAR interview method, right? Situational, what was your task? What was your action? What was the result? Those kind of things really help. And it makes a candidate, again, feel included. They're part of your process. They're part of what you're trying to do, instead of just a pawn in the game.
Yeah.
And that's going to help them really.
Just in case someone hasn't heard about the STAR method, could you just just unpack that a little bit more?
Of course. So STAR method is basically pretty simple. When somebody asks you a question, you can respond in a certain way. You can just start rambling like I usually do. That's one way. And the other way is actually describe the situation. So what was the situation of an example that you want to give them? And then what were the tasks that you had to perform on that situation? So you're actually explaining them what you did without driving it to an ego part. But this was the situation. This is what I had to do. And these were the actions that I took. And often this is why I took those actions, right? And then you get to the result. Hey, the result was I made X amount of hires, or I finished the project 10 days earlier, but it gives the interviewer a lot of information that they can actually work with, that they can actually ask you on details instead of just, okay, that sounds nice. So you're going to give a lot of details, because a lot of people in interviews, and this is something that you really notice, is they take things for granted, like recruiters do, right? They take things for granted that you know how it works. So they won't mention those special little things they've done on a project or the impact that they had. By using STAR or another methodology, you're actually pushing them into recognizing themselves, what they did, what the situation was, and what the result was. And often they will come back and say, crap, I was actually good at my job, because you're focusing on the good results and not just on saying, hey, give me an answer.
Yeah.
It's a huge difference for most people.
Yeah. And then just to close the loop on the feedback, you said you build it into your structured interview process with feedback built in. Is that after every stage, or do you just do like right at the end?
So after every stage and with every interviewer. So our interviewers are not able to look at each other's feedback. They can only look at it after they interview. So there's no bias there.
Yeah.
And what we do, and it depends on the candidate, right? If they go out early in the process, that's me giving the feedback. But in some cases, when they're on the end of the process and they really want the details, some hiring managers will actually hop on a call with them to provide feedback or write a short blurb for you so you can communicate it.
Yeah.
So that's really important. And if they went out just before offer, right? One stage before offer, get the whole team together and basically discuss the candidate and why not and why, because that's going to help you in two ways. One, you're going to give the candidate good feedback. And two, that candidate almost made an hire. So what did we miss? It's going to give you that extra little piece of information as well.
Yeah, I think it's really a really cool way to sort of wrap up this thing, because I think I'm putting it very crudely, but it almost is like a good way to communicate with engineers is to not always feel like you have to communicate with them directly. Like just get your hiring manager to help you, get your team to help you. So it's not like you have to come up with all of the feedback yourself. You can actually gather it from the team and put it together. But that's really cool piece of advice. I think we've touched on many things. Thank you so much for your experience and insight. I think it's really cool to hear from someone who, as we said, has had experience on both sides. I think it's not to say, as we said at the top, that you need to have been a developer or need to have experience in tech. It's just about developing the right mindset to help you reach out more successfully, and also in a nicer way, I think.
And that's the thing, right?
Yeah.
A nicer way, because we're hiring people. We're not hiring numbers or profiles. We're hiring people. We call them candidates, but they're still people.
Yeah,
it's that simple.
So yeah, thanks for joining me on the podcast and sharing some insight. It was really cool to chat to you, Mark.
Thanks for having me. And honestly, I love the questions. Absolutely love them.
Cool. I'm glad.